Welcome to Hauntales, where darkest stories come alive. I know many of you tune into these tales to drift off to sleep, so settle in, relax, and get comfortable. Whether you're lying in bed or curled up on the couch, let the whispers of these chilling encounters carry you away. Before we begin tonight's story, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more spine-tingling tales, and let me know in the comments where are you listening from, and what time is it. I love seeing how far our stories travel. For the best experience, use your headphones, close your eyes, and let every word sink deep into your mind. Now we begin our stories for tonight. The final puzzle. In the heart of a sprawling metropolis, four friends gathered at their favorite coffee shop, a cozy nook where laughter and the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. They had shared countless memories within these walls, but the shadow of impending adulthood loomed over them. Each was at a personal crossroads, and their time together was dwindling. The thought of drifting apart weighed heavily on their hearts, prompting Alex to propose one last adventure, something that would serve as a fitting farewell before they stepped into the next chapter of their lives. Alex was the vibrant spark of the group, known for his charismatic personality and love for challenges. With tousled dark hair and a contagious grin, he often thrived on spontaneity, inspiring his friends to step outside their comfort zones. His enthusiasm for life was palpable, but beneath the surface, he grappled with anxiety about what lay ahead. Graduation loomed, and Alex feared that their bond might fray in the face of adult responsibilities. When he stumbled upon an advertisement for a high-tech escape room, he saw it as the perfect opportunity to bond one last time and create lasting memories. Maya, the meticulous planner, balanced Alex's impulsiveness with her own analytical mind. With her shoulder-length chestnut hair pulled back and her glasses perched on her nose, she was known for her level-headedness and attention to detail. Maya was the group's voice of reason, always approaching challenges with a calculated mindset. Though she had a penchant for organization, a part of her felt anxious about the future. Graduation meant uncertainty, and she longed to solidify their connection before everyone ventured off to different cities and jobs. The escape room intrigued her, not only as a chance for fun but also as a test of their teamwork. Ethan the Joker was the life of the party. With a mop of messy blonde hair and an infectious laugh, he brought lightness to any gathering. His quick wit and sense of humor often masked a deeper sensitivity. He cared deeply for his friends and valued their bond. The thought of them drifting apart gnawed at him, and he felt a subtle pressure to make their last adventure memorable. When Alex suggested the escape room, Ethan jumped on board, excited by the prospect of challenges that would bring them closer, even if it meant facing intense situations together. Lila, the quiet observer, provided a contrasting energy to the group. With long, dark hair and an artistic flair, she often preferred to express herself through her sketches and stories rather than through words. Lila had always felt like the outsider within their tight-knit group, but her creativity brought a unique perspective to their dynamic. As graduation approached, she felt a growing sense of urgency to solidify her friendships, fearing that her quieter nature might be overlooked as they all went their separate ways. The escape room, though daunting, sparked her imagination, and she saw it as a canvas for an adventure that could be immortalized in her art. One evening, as they gathered at their regular cafe, Alex brought up the escape room he had discovered online. It was advertised as a state-of-the-art facility, offering a unique, immersive experience that promised to challenge not just their intellect but also their ability to work together under pressure. He explained how they would be locked in a room and have to solve puzzles to escape within a set time limit. Maya's eyes sparkled with interest, Ethan's laughter echoed with excitement, and Lila felt her heart race with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. They began discussing their expectations and what they hoped to achieve during the experience, creating a buzz of anticipation around the table. They pulled out their phones, eagerly scrolling through the escape room's website. As colorful images flashed on the screen, each room appeared more intriguing than the last, with puzzles that ranged from cryptic codes to intricate physical challenges. They were particularly drawn to the final puzzle, which promised an elaborate storyline and unique technological elements. The friends couldn't help but imagine the thrill of unraveling mysteries together, picturing themselves as protagonists in a daring escape narrative. Once they settled on a date for their adventure, a sense of excitement washed over them. They made plans to meet earlier that day, wanting to soak up every moment before their lives took them in different directions. As graduation drew near, the thought of separation became more real, and this escape room became a symbol of their last stand as a unit. They filled the remaining days with reminiscing about their college experiences, laughing over inside jokes, and expressing their hopes and fears about the future. As the date approached, they began preparing for the escape room experience. Maya immersed herself in research, watching videos of previous participants to glean strategies for solving the puzzles. Alex, ever the planner, created a group chat to keep everyone updated and pumped for the adventure. Ethan lightened the mood with memes and jokes, while Lila took it all in, sketching whimsical ideas of what the escape room might look like. Their dynamic felt charged with excitement, and they looked forward to the adrenaline rush that awaited them. On the day of the escape room, a palpable sense of excitement filled the air. They met outside the designated building, an unassuming structure nestled between towering skyscrapers. The weather was perfect, the sun casting a golden glow on the pavement as they approached the entrance. They took a moment to absorb the moment, feeling the weight of their impending separation and the thrill of the unknown before them. As they stood in front of the entrance, the reality of the situation began to set in. They were on the verge of stepping into a world designed to challenge them, a physical manifestation of their friendship and their shared experiences. They exchanged nervous glances, their hearts racing at the thought of what lay ahead. Each friend felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety, knowing that the experience would test their limits but also bring them closer together one last time. As the group stepped closer to the entrance of the building housing the escape room, a chill wind swept through the air, sending shivers down their spines. The old structure loomed before them, a relic from another time, its brick facade crumbling in places, overtaken by creeping vines. Flickering neon lights buzzed overhead, casting an eerie glow on the cracked pavement beneath their feet. A small sign, slightly askew, read "Mind Games, the ultimate escape room experience." It felt as if the building itself was breathing, exhaling a sense of foreboding. Inside, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The air was thick with anticipation and the faint scent of damp wood. They stepped into a dimly lit reception area, adorned with mysterious artifacts, ancient keys, old clocks, and weathered photographs. Shadows danced along the walls as they approached the reception desk, which was manned by a young woman with strikingly pale skin and unnaturally bright red lipstick. Her smile was wide, but her eyes seemed to hold secrets. "Welcome to Mind Games," she said, her voice smooth yet slightly unsettling. "I hope you're ready for a challenge." She glanced at each of them, as if weighing their resolve. "Before we begin, there are a few rules you must follow." The friends exchanged glances, intrigued yet unnerved. The attendant continued, her demeanor shifting as she recited the ominous guidelines. "You will have 1 hour to escape. The puzzles you face are not just for fun, they're designed to test your very limits. Do not break any objects, they may be crucial to your escape. Trust your instincts, but remember, not everything is as it seems." She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "And most importantly, if you hear any whispers or feel an unseen presence, do not engage. Just keep moving. You'll know when the time is right." Her eyes bore into theirs, and for a moment, the air felt thick with tension. A shiver ran through each of them as they nodded, dismissing the attendant's cryptic warnings as mere theatrics. With their hearts racing, they signed the waiver, the ink seeming to flow thicker than normal. The attendant collected their forms and, with a flourish, gestured toward a heavy wooden door at the back of the room. "Your journey awaits. Step through, and may the odds be in your favor." The friends exchanged nervous laughter, shaking off the growing unease as they approached the door. With a creak that echoed ominously through the room, the door swung open, revealing a dimly lit corridor that seemed to stretch endlessly into the unknown. The walls were adorned with dark wallpaper, faded and peeling, and the low hum of distant machinery could be heard. As they stepped inside, a strange sensation washed over them, as if the air had thickened. The door swung shut behind them with a resounding thud, and the click of a lock echoed ominously. A shiver ran down their spines as they stood in the darkened room, their laughter replaced by an unsettling silence. The room was bathed in shadows, and as they took a moment to gather their bearings, the flickering lights overhead cast distorted shapes against the walls. An old clock ticked rhythmically in the corner, its hands moving steadily forward, yet somehow they felt as if time was slipping away from them. In the center of the room, a large table stood, cluttered with odd items, keys, ropes, and cryptic notes that seemed to beckon them closer. "All right, let's figure this out," Alex said, trying to inject some levity into the atmosphere. But as he spoke, the lights flickered again, and for a brief moment, they felt as if they were not alone. A whisper, soft and barely audible, seemed to curl around their ears, sending a chill down their spines. "Did you hear that?" Maya asked, her voice trembling slightly. They all nodded, glancing around the room as shadows shifted in the corners of their vision. The feeling of being watched intensified, and the excitement they had felt moments ago began to morph into dread. They stood in a tight circle, the air growing colder around them as the clock continued to tick. The reality of their situation began to sink in, but it was too late. They were trapped, not just in this room, but in a game far more sinister than they had anticipated. The escape room had begun, and as the first puzzle materialized before them, they had no idea of the horrors that lay ahead. The atmosphere in the escape room shifted as the group began to explore the puzzles laid before them. The dim light flickered overhead, creating an unsettling dance of shadows along the walls. A sense of anticipation filled the air as the first puzzle came into focus, a large, ornate box sitting at the center of the room, its intricate carvings hinting at hidden secrets. The carvings depicted strange creatures entwined with vines, their eyes seemingly alive, watching as they approached. Each twist and turn of the vines seemed to suggest a story, one that hinted at both wonder and danger. Alex leaned closer, tracing his fingers over the carvings, feeling the coolness of the wood beneath his touch. "Looks like we need to figure out how to open it," he said, his voice laced with excitement, barely able to contain the thrill coursing through him. The box was locked, and a small riddle was inscribed on the lid: "I speak without a mouth and hear without ears. I have no body, but I come alive with the wind. What am I?" Maya furrowed her brow, her mind racing as she tried to dissect the riddle's meaning. "An echo. It must be an echo," she exclaimed, her voice rising with confidence. They shared a brief moment of victory when Alex shouted the answer aloud. As if on cue, the box clicked open, revealing a set of colorful keys nestled inside, each glimmering with an inviting sheen. The keys were simple, benign-looking objects, yet a peculiar chill raced down Maya's spine as she picked one up, its metal cool against her skin, a stark contrast to the warmth of her fingers. With their first puzzle solved, they felt a surge of confidence flooding through the group. They grabbed the keys and began searching the room for the next clue. On the far wall, they found a massive, rusty padlock, which appeared to guard an old wooden chest. The chest was weathered, its surface marred by age, and a faint musty odor wafted from it as they approached, the smell reminiscent of forgotten memories and long-lost secrets. The lock looked like it hadn't been touched in years, covered in a layer of dust that seemed to whisper of stories left untold. "Let's see if one of these keys works," Ethan suggested, his tone eager, anticipation lighting up his eyes. They took turns trying the keys, the sounds of metallic clinks echoing through the room like distant chimes, punctuating the silence. With each unsuccessful attempt, a sense of unease began to creep in, the shadows in the room shifting subtly, as if aware of their growing frustration. As the last key finally clicked into place and the padlock sprang open, they felt a mix of relief and trepidation, the air thickening around them. Inside the chest lay a collection of old photographs and strange, unsettling items: small dolls with cracked porcelain faces, a faded diary, and an antique music box that appeared to have long stopped working. The photographs were black and white, depicting scenes from what looked like a different era, capturing moments frozen in time. In one photo, a group of people stood smiling outside the very building they were trapped in, yet there was something hollow in their eyes, as if their smiles were forced, masking a deeper sorrow. "Creepy," Lila murmured, flipping through the diary, her fingers trembling as they brushed against the brittle pages. The diary was filled with scrawled handwriting, detailing someone's daily life in the train station. As she read, a chill settled over the group, the tone of the entries shifting from mundane to sinister, as if the writer's mind had gradually succumbed to despair. The last entry abruptly ended with the words, "They're coming for me. I can hear the whispers in the dark." The implications hung in the air, a foreboding that sent shivers down their spines. The music box caught their attention next, its painted lid adorned with delicate flowers, now faded and chipped. They took turns winding it, and the soft melody that played filled the room with an unsettling nostalgia, a sweet tune twisted by the weight of their surroundings. As the haunting notes echoed in the air, they noticed the shadows around them deepening, stretching across the walls like tendrils reaching for their warmth, inching closer with each note. "That's pretty unsettling," Alex remarked, his voice barely a whisper, as the melody carried a hint of melancholy. The music continued, weaving a spell that pulled at their emotions, making them feel both comforted and unnerved. With each turn of the crank, the shadows seemed to shift closer, responding to the music's melancholic call, a silent pact forming between the melody and the darkness. After a moment, they shook off the eerie sensation and focused on the next puzzle, which was presented to them in the form of an ancient-looking clock mounted on the wall. Its hands were stuck at midnight, frozen in time, and a riddle was etched around its face: "Time is a thief, but I hold it tight. Find the hour that never fades into night." They huddled together, the clock ticking ominously in the silence, each tick echoing through the air like a countdown to something unknown. Ethan scratched his head, pondering the riddle. What does it mean by the hour that never fades? Midnight. Noon. His voice trailed off, uncertainty creeping in. The clock seemed to tick louder as they debated, the atmosphere thickening with tension. They were unaware that the shadows in the room had begun to swirl, feeding off their confusion and growing more menacing by the second. After a few moments of silence, Lila's eyes widened, a glimmer of realization lighting up her face. "What if it means the hour of our birth?" she suggested, her voice trembling with a mix of excitement and fear. "That's a time that stays with us forever," they nodded, the answer resonating within them, feeling an odd connection to the riddle, as if it held more meaning than they could grasp. They quickly wrote down their birth hours, But as they placed their answers into a small compartment on the clock, a chill swept through the room. The clock's hands began to spin wildly, a cacophony of sounds filling the air as the clock struck 12. The overwhelming noise drowned out their thoughts, and the sound of shattering glass echoed from the corner, pulling their attention away from the chaos. They turned to see that the glass case housing a collection of hourglasses had burst open, shards glittering like wicked teeth scattered across the floor. Sand spilled out, drifting slowly to the ground, yet no one seemed to notice the ominous change in the air. The music box continued to play its haunting tune, drowning out the sounds of their unease. They were trapped in a web of puzzles, each more twisted than the last. With every puzzle solved, they felt as though they were sinking deeper into a nightmare from which there was no escape. The whispers that had lingered in the air began to grow louder, becoming indistinct but insistent, urging them to keep moving. As they completed the clock puzzle, a trapdoor slid open at the far end of the room, revealing a steep staircase leading down into darkness. Their hearts raced, but curiosity pushed them forward. They peered down, and the air that wafted up from below was cold, like a grave's breath. The darkness seemed to throb with an unspoken promise, an invitation that none of them could resist. With hesitant glances exchanged, they took a collective breath and descended the stairs. Each step felt heavier, the air growing denser as they ventured further down. They were entering the unknown, the light from above quickly fading until it became a distant memory. The whispers intensified, wrapping around them like an unseen shroud. There was no turning back now. As they descended the narrow staircase, the walls began to close in around them, each step reverberating with an eerie echo that mirrored their growing anxiety. The darkness enveloped them like a heavy blanket, pressing down and amplifying the whispers that floated just beyond comprehension. They exchanged nervous glances, the thrill of the adventure now tainted with an unsettling awareness of their surroundings. Shadows danced along the walls, twisting and morphing, as if alive, feeding on their unease. At the bottom of the stairs, they stepped into a dimly lit chamber, its atmosphere thick with tension. The room was filled with a series of interconnected chambers, each separated by heavy, wrought iron gates. Flickering lights hung from the ceiling like ominous stars, casting strange patterns that seemed to shift with their movements. The air was tinged with a metallic scent, a hint of something old and decaying. In the center of the room stood an old wooden table, its surface scarred and worn, bearing the weight of time and secrets. Upon the table lay a series of objects, each more bizarre than the last. A weathered diary, its pages yellowed and crumbling, a twisted set of keys that seemed to pulse with an energy of their own, and a set of antique cards, each inscribed with cryptic symbols that seemed to shift when viewed from the corner of their eyes. Lila reached out to touch the diary, feeling a sudden chill wash over her as she flipped through the fragile pages, the ink smudged and fading, words twisted and illegible. The group began to examine the objects, feeling a magnetic pull toward the cards. Alex picked one up, studying it closely. The card depicted a figure cloaked in darkness, holding a lantern that illuminated a twisted path. "This must be a clue," he said, his voice laced with excitement. He flipped it over, revealing a riddle that sent a shiver down his spine. The path ahead is shrouded in dread. Follow the light, or lose your head. Maya's breath quickened as she spoke. "What do you think it means? Are we supposed to follow the light?" The uncertainty in her voice echoed throughout the chamber. As if in response, the lights flickered violently overhead, casting long shadows that swayed like specters in the dark. Each flicker seemed to whisper a warning, urging them to reconsider their choices. Ignoring the growing tension, they started discussing their next move, their voices intertwining with the echoes that surrounded them. They could feel the weight of unseen eyes watching them, the air thickening with an almost palpable sense of dread. In the corner of the chamber, an iron gate creaked open, revealing a dark corridor that seemed to beckon them deeper into the labyrinth of the escape room. It was a path cloaked in shadows, the walls pulsating as if alive, waiting for them to step closer. Without a clear direction, they decided to explore the corridor. As they ventured forward, the walls seemed to close in, the chill deepening as the darkness wrapped around them. The corridor stretched endlessly, branching into smaller passages that appeared and vanished, each turn leading them further into the unknown. A sense of isolation gripped them. They were no longer four friends on an adventure, but individuals caught in a nightmarish maze with no way out. Suddenly, an ominous sound echoed through the corridor, a low, rumbling growl that sent chills racing down their spines. They paused, exchanging anxious glances, feeling the weight of fear settle heavily in their chests. The walls vibrated with the sound, a malevolent presence lurking just out of sight. Their hearts raced as they pressed forward, knowing that turning back was not an option. As they continued, they stumbled upon a door partially ajar, a flickering light spilling from the crack. They hesitated, the air thick with foreboding. With a shared glance, they pushed the door open, revealing a small room filled with dusty relics. The walls were lined with mirrors, each reflecting distorted images of themselves, creating a funhouse effect that disoriented their senses. Each reflection seemed to carry an emotion of its own, amplifying their fears and doubts. In the center of the room stood a large, ornate mirror framed in tarnished gold. It seemed to hum with an otherworldly energy, pulling them closer as if it held secrets meant only for them. Ethan stepped forward, drawn by an inexplicable force. As he approached, the surface of the mirror rippled like water, distorting his reflection. He reached out to touch it, and the moment his fingers brushed against the cool glass, the room plunged into darkness. They were plunged into an abyss, the familiar sounds of the escape room replaced by a deafening silence. Panic surged through the group as they stumbled backward, their breaths coming in quick gasps. The mirror's surface glowed faintly, casting an eerie light that illuminated their faces. Whispers filled the air, swirling around them like a storm, pressing against their ears and clawing at their sanity. "Maya, are you okay?" Alex shouted, searching for her in the enveloping darkness. The panic in his voice was palpable, slicing through the overwhelming silence. Each second felt like an eternity, the shadows encroaching closer, threatening to swallow them whole. They could hear the frantic breaths of one another, the fear palpable in the air. Suddenly, a piercing scream erupted from the depths of the darkness, echoing through the room like a death knell. The sound sent shock waves through their bodies, paralyzing them with fear. "We need to find a way out," Ethan yelled, his voice barely cutting through the chaos. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of torment that clawed at their minds, threatening to pull them into despair. Just as the darkness began to close in around them, the lights flickered back to life, revealing the room once more. The mirror stood as it had before, but something was different. The reflections had changed. They no longer showed their own faces, but twisted versions of themselves, grinning maliciously, their eyes dark and hollow. The realization hit them like a cold wave. They were being hunted, and the room had transformed into a labyrinth of horrors. "We need to stick together," Maya urged, her voice trembling. The four of them huddled closer, determination mingling with fear. They had to face whatever darkness awaited them and find a way to escape the room before it consumed them entirely. As they turned to leave, the door slammed shut with a deafening bang, echoing ominously through the chamber. The room fell silent once more, and they stood frozen, their hearts pounding in unison. The shadows shifted, the atmosphere thick with an unshakable sense of dread. They had unwittingly crossed a threshold from which there was no return, and the real game was only just beginning. The atmosphere thickened as they huddled together, the oppressive weight of the room closing in on them. The flickering lights overhead cast jagged shadows that danced along the walls, creating a distorted version of reality. The door remained firmly shut, sealing them inside this unsettling space. The four friends exchanged glances, their faces illuminated by the intermittent glow of the lights, each reflecting a mixture of fear and determination. They knew that staying together was their only chance for survival. Maya took a deep breath, her heart racing. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice wavering. The remnants of their earlier excitement had dissipated, replaced by a palpable tension that hung in the air. They needed a plan, a way to navigate the maze of horrors they had stumbled into. The room felt alive, the walls seeming to pulse as if they were aware of their presence. Ethan stepped forward, trying to sound confident despite the trepidation gnawing at him. "Let's focus on the mirror," he suggested, pointing toward the ornate glass that had revealed their distorted reflections. "It must hold some kind of significance. Maybe it's the key to escaping this place." The others nodded, though doubt lingered in their eyes. They were not only trapped physically, the fear that seeped into their minds was just as binding. As they approached the mirror again, a low hum began to fill the air, vibrating through their bones. The surface shimmered, revealing glimpses of twisted imagery, flashes of their deepest fears and insecurities, their faces contorted in despair. It felt as if the mirror was feeding on their emotions, amplifying their dread. Lila reached out, but the closer she got, the more it felt like a barrier, pushing her away. "It's almost like it's alive," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe it's trying to show us something," Alex replied, studying the shifting reflections. "We need to confront what we see in there." The group was reluctant, but knew that avoiding the mirror wouldn't help them escape. They had to face the darkness head-on, both within themselves and the room. With a shared resolve, they stood before the mirror, willing to confront whatever truths lay hidden within its depths. As they gazed into the glass, the images began to morph, coalescing into scenes from their pasts. Each friend was confronted with their own failures, regrets, and haunted memories. Maya saw herself standing alone on graduation day, watching as her friends celebrated without her, the loneliness swallowing her whole. Ethan saw flashes of moments when he could have been braver, moments of weakness that haunted him. The mirror held a mirror to their souls, revealing their inner demons. Suddenly the room began to tremble, the lights flickering violently as if in response to their revelations. Shadows writhed along the walls, taking on grotesque forms that reached out toward them, threatening to pull them into the abyss. "What do we do?" Lila cried, her voice laced with panic. The images in the mirror shifted again, this time revealing a path, a twisted labyrinth filled with doors and traps. "Look," Alex shouted, pointing at the mirror as the reflections outlined a route. "It's showing us a way through. We need to follow what it's telling us." With a renewed sense of purpose, the group stepped back from the mirror and glanced around the room. The shadows flickered, and one of the walls appeared to shimmer, almost inviting them closer. They moved toward the shimmering wall, feeling a magnetic pull guiding their steps. As they approached, the surface rippled, and without a word they reached out. The moment their hands touched the wall, a cold rush of air surged around them, and the darkness deepened, consuming their surroundings. They braced themselves for what lay ahead, hoping the mirror's guidance would lead them to freedom. Emerging through the shimmering wall, they found themselves in a dimly lit hallway, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and decay. Flickering torches lined the stone walls, casting eerie shadows that danced around them. Each step echoed ominously, the sound swallowed by the darkness that loomed ahead. As they ventured further, the hallway began to narrow, the walls pressing in like a vice, heightening their anxiety. "This feels wrong," Ethan muttered, glancing back at the shifting shadows behind them. "We shouldn't have come this way," but there was no turning back now. They were committed to finding a way out, even if it led them deeper into the unknown. The oppressive silence around them felt alive, whispering secrets they dared not comprehend. A sudden gust of wind swept through the corridor, extinguishing the torches and plunging them into darkness. Panic gripped them as they fumbled for each other in the pitch blackness. "Stay close," Maya shouted, her voice trembling as she reached for Alex's hand. The darkness felt suffocating, an entity all its own, pressing against their skin, threatening to engulf them entirely. Just as their fear began to spiral, a faint light flickered back to life ahead, illuminating a door at the end of the corridor. It was slightly ajar, an invitation that felt both enticing and foreboding. The group exchanged cautious glances, their hearts pounding in unison. Could this be a way out, or merely another trap? With a mixture of trepidation and hope, they approached the door, its hinges creaking ominously as they pushed it open. Inside, they found a small chamber adorned with strange symbols carved into the stone walls, each glowing softly as if imbued with some ancient energy. The air buzzed with an unexplainable tension, and the atmosphere crackled with anticipation. In the center of the room stood a pedestal with an intricately designed box resting upon it, covered in delicate filigree. The sight was mesmerizing, drawing them closer, yet they couldn't shake the sense that they were treading into dangerous territory. "Should we open it?" Lila asked, her eyes wide with curiosity and fear. The box seemed to hum with energy, almost alive in its stillness. They could feel its weight bearing down on them, filled with potential and peril. The atmosphere thickened with uncertainty, a primal instinct warning them of the unknown consequences that awaited should they choose to open it. Without waiting for an answer, Maya reached out and lifted the lid of the box. A rush of wind swept through the chamber, carrying with it whispers that echoed in their minds, twisting their thoughts and amplifying their fears. Inside the box lay a collection of odd artifacts, a tarnished compass that spun wildly, a small vial filled with a dark, viscous liquid, and a key that shimmered with an ethereal glow. The moment Maya touched the key, the room shuddered violently, the walls vibrating as if in protest. Shadows surged around them, the whispers intensifying into a cacophony of voices, each demanding to be heard. The temperature dropped sharply, sending chills racing down their spines. They had awakened something, and now it was angry. "Get back," Alex shouted as the shadows coalesced into a shape, a dark figure emerging from the corner of the chamber. The entity loomed over them, its form shifting and flickering, embodying their deepest fears and regrets. It reached out with a hand that was not a hand, a swirling mass of darkness that threatened to envelop them. "We need to escape," Ethan urged, his voice laced with urgency. In their panic, they turned to flee, scrambling toward the door they had entered. But the shadows surged forward, blocking their path, feeding on their fear and despair. They were trapped, ensnared in a web of darkness that had been woven around them from the moment they entered this twisted escape room. "Use the key," Maya shouted, her voice rising above the chaos. The key shimmered in her hand, radiating a faint light that pushed back against the encroaching shadows. With a desperate resolve, she ran toward the pedestal, hoping against hope that it would unlock a way out. But as she approached, the darkness intensified, swirling around her, seeking to claim her as its own. The friends huddled together, fear coursing through their veins. They knew they had to work together, combining their strength to face the shadows that threatened to consume them. With newfound determination, they focused on the key, its glow illuminating the darkness. pushing back against the shadows as they surrounded Maya. "Focus on the light," Alex yelled, grabbing Maya's shoulder. They formed a circle around her, channeling their energy into the key, feeling the weight of their shared fears and doubts. The shadows writhed in response, but they stood firm, united against the encroaching darkness. As they poured their strength into the key, it began to pulse with light, a beacon amidst the despair. Suddenly, a blinding flash erupted from the key, illuminating the chamber with a searing brilliance. The shadows recoiled, screaming in agony as the light pierced through their form, dispelling the darkness that had held them captive. The walls shook violently, the ancient symbols glowing brightly as the entity began to unravel, disintegrating into nothingness. As the blinding light enveloped them, they felt the oppressive weight of fear lift, the room returning to its previous stillness. The shadows receded, leaving only the soft glow of the key and the pedestal behind. The key had transformed, now shimmering with an almost ethereal energy, a symbol of their victory over the darkness. Breathless and shaken, the group stood together, hearts racing as they processed what had just occurred. They had faced the shadows and emerged victorious, but the experience had left its mark. With a sense of purpose, they turned to the door, ready to confront whatever awaited them beyond the threshold, determined to navigate the twisted escape room together, no matter the challenges that lay ahead. The atmosphere within the escape room shifted once again, the remnants of their confrontation with the darkness lingering in the air like a ghostly echo. While the victory over the shadows provided a momentary reprieve, an uneasy feeling settled in their stomachs. The flickering lights overhead cast long, exaggerated shadows across the room, and an ominous silence enveloped them, amplifying the sense of foreboding. They knew the room still held more secrets, more dangers hidden within its walls. Ethan turned to the group, his expression a mixture of determination and lingering fear. "We can't let our guard down now. We've come this far, and we need to find a way out before something else comes after us." His voice resonated with an urgency that spurred the others into action. The key pulsed softly in Maya's hand, its light a reassuring beacon in the oppressive darkness. They returned their focus to the pedestal and the items scattered around it. The compass, still spinning erratically, seemed to mock their attempts at direction, while the vial glistened with an unsettling sheen, as if it contained some dark, unknown essence. With a newfound sense of purpose, they began to explore their surroundings again, their hearts racing with each step deeper into the escape room's labyrinthine design. Maya picked up the vial, holding it up to the dim light. "What do you think this is?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. The liquid inside swirled like ink in water, dark and inviting, but ominous at the same time. "We should probably leave it behind," Lila replied, her brow furrowed with worry. It could be dangerous, but Maya felt an inexplicable pull toward the vial, as if it were calling to her. Its dark liquid holding the answers to the mysteries they faced. "Let's put it in our bag for now," Maya said, tucking the vial away. "If we need it, we'll have it." The others exchanged glances, silently weighing the risk, but nodded in agreement. The escape room was already unsettling enough. They needed every advantage they could get. With the items secured, they prepared to explore the next part of the room, a sense of dread lingering at the back of their minds. As they moved toward the far wall, they discovered another door, aged and worn, with rusted hinges that creaked ominously when they pushed it open. Beyond lay a narrow corridor, dimly lit by flickering fluorescent lights that hummed unsettlingly. The atmosphere felt charged, as if the air itself were alive with the memories of those who had come before them, each step reverberating with the whispers of their failures. The corridor twisted and turned, leading them into a series of smaller rooms, each one more bizarre than the last. The first was filled with forgotten toys, each one coated in a layer of dust, their once vibrant colors muted and lifeless. Laughter echoed faintly just beyond reach, a haunting reminder of the joy that had long since faded from these items. As they wandered through, Ethan's heart raced. A sense of nostalgia mixed with dread washed over him, memories of childhood games intertwining with the knowledge that something terrible lurked in the shadows. In another room, they found a wall adorned with photographs, images of past contestants frozen in expressions of terror and despair. Their eyes seemed to follow the group, filled with a pleading desperation, as if they were warning them of the fate that awaited. "This is all so disturbing," Lila whispered, her skin crawling under the weight of the unblinking gazes. "What happened to them?" The group exchanged worried glances, the gravity of their situation sinking in. "We need to keep moving," Alex urged, trying to shake off the creeping sensation of dread. "The longer we stay here, the more danger we're in." They pressed on, leaving the room of sorrow behind, yet unable to shake the feeling that they were being watched, the photographs etching themselves into their minds. As they continued down the corridor, they stumbled upon a room that appeared to be an old library, filled with towering shelves of dusty books. The air was thick with the smell of aged paper and mildew. The faint sound of whispers echoed between the shelves, drawing them deeper into the room. It felt as if the books themselves were alive, their pages rustling in a language they couldn't comprehend. Maya felt a shiver run down her spine. There was something sinister about the atmosphere, as if knowledge held a dark price. Ethan reached for a book, its leather cover cracked and weathered. "What if there's something in here that can help us?" he suggested, flipping it open. The pages were filled with cryptic symbols and phrases that seemed to dance before their eyes, words that twisted into incomprehensible shapes. The whispers grew louder, rising to a crescendo that drowned out their thoughts, enveloping them in a cacophony of sound. "Put it down," Maya cried, her voice breaking through the noise. The words seemed to claw at their minds, urging them to forget the outside world, to surrender to the knowledge that lay within the pages. Ethan, caught in the grip of the book's allure, hesitated, his fingers itching to turn another page. The weight of the darkness pressed in on them, and the air grew heavier, making it hard to breathe. With a surge of willpower, Maya stepped forward, snatching the book from Ethan's hands and tossing it back onto the shelf. The moment it left his grasp, the whispers faded, replaced by an eerie silence. The oppressive atmosphere lifted slightly, though the shadows remained a constant presence, lurking just beyond their vision. "Thank you," Ethan said, shaken but grateful. The group took a moment to collect themselves, their breathing steadying as they regrouped. It was clear they needed to keep moving and avoid any further entanglements with the malevolent energy that pulsed through the escape room. They turned toward the exit, determined to leave the library behind, though the weight of what they had just experienced lingered in their minds. With each step, the corridor twisted deeper into darkness, and a sense of impending doom began to settle over them once more. They could sense the walls closing in, the space growing more confined and claustrophobic. Shadows flickered at the edges of their vision, whispering secrets of despair and desperation. Time was slipping away, and they felt the pressure of the ticking clock as they struggled against the ever-looming darkness that threatened to consume them. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the corridor, sending them all jumping back. They turned to see the door behind them slam shut, sealing off their only escape. Panic surged through the group, their hearts pounding in unison. "What just happened?" Lila exclaimed, her voice trembling. "It's like the room is alive," Alex said, his eyes wide with fear. "It's trying to trap us." The tension mounted as they realized that their predicament was far more dire than they had anticipated. The escape room was not just a game, it was a sinister entity, preying on their fears and using their own emotions against them. They were running out of time, and the stakes were higher than ever. Determined to find a way out, they pressed on, hoping the next room held the answers they desperately needed. Each step was fraught with anxiety, the darkness closing in around them. With their hearts racing and a sense of urgency propelling them forward, they knew they had to face whatever awaited them in the shadows, even as the sinister forces conspired against them. With their hearts racing and the oppressive darkness weighing heavily on them, the group pressed onward, fueled by a desperate need to escape the escape room's sinister grasp. The corridors twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the unknown, but they held on to the hope that somewhere ahead lay the key to their freedom. As they rounded another corner, they found themselves in a vast room, the ceiling stretching far above them, obscured by the darkness. The walls were lined with mirrors that reflected fragmented images of their anxious faces, each glance filled with a mix of fear and determination. The room pulsed with an eerie glow, the dim lights flickering like fireflies trapped in glass. In the center of the room stood a large, ornate clock, its hands spinning wildly, disconnected from the flow of time. Maya stepped closer, her breath hitching as she saw their reflections warped in the glass. "I think this clock is important," she said, her voice steadying despite the fear gripping her heart. "We need to find a way to stop it." Ethan scanned the room, looking for any clues that might help them decipher the clock's secret. "There has to be something here," he muttered, glancing at the mirrors that surrounded them. As he moved closer to one of the reflective surfaces, he noticed something strange. In the reflection, the clock's hands appeared to pause momentarily, then resume their frenetic spinning. It was as if the mirror held a truth the physical world could not grasp. "Look," Ethan exclaimed, drawing the attention of the others. "When I stand here, the clock behaves differently." The group gathered around him, their eyes widening as they began to understand. "We need to replicate the positions we see in the reflection," Maya said, her voice filled with urgency. "It's a puzzle. If we can align ourselves correctly, maybe we can stop the clock." They quickly formed a line, each friend taking their place in front of the clock, mirroring the distorted figures in the glass. The clock continued to spin chaotically, its sound echoing ominously in the room. With each passing second, the air grew heavier, and the shadows seemed to whisper dark promises of despair. As they positioned themselves, a surge of energy filled the room, almost tangible in its intensity. They could feel the darkness pressing against them, attempting to break their concentration. "Focus," Ethan shouted, determination shining in his eyes. "We can do this together." In synchrony, they raised their hands toward the clock, hoping to create a bond that would transcend the room's malevolence. As they did, the mirrors surrounding them began to crack, the sharp sound echoing ominously. Maya glanced nervously at the fractures, but her resolve remained firm. "We can't give up now." The clock's hands slowed, their frantic dance giving way to a rhythmic ticking. The shadows began to recede, losing their grip on the group. With a final push, they concentrated on the task at hand, and a brilliant light erupted from the clock, blinding them momentarily. When the light subsided, they found themselves standing in the middle of the room, the clock silent at last. The mirrors had shattered completely, fragments glittering like stars scattered across the floor. The oppressive atmosphere had lifted, replaced by a palpable sense of relief and triumph. They exchanged stunned glances, breathless with the weight of what they had just accomplished. "Did we do it?" Lila asked, her voice trembling with disbelief. Ethan grinned, a look of exhilaration on his face. "I think we did. We stopped the clock." As if to affirm their victory, the wall opposite them began to shimmer, revealing a doorway bathed in soft, inviting light. The path ahead beckoned them, promising freedom from the escape room's dark grasp. With their hearts pounding with renewed hope, they moved toward the doorway, the warmth of its glow wrapping around them like a comforting embrace. Stepping through the threshold, they emerged back into the cool night air, the oppressive darkness of the escape room behind them. The stars twinkled brightly above, a stark contrast to the sinister atmosphere they had just escaped. They found themselves standing outside the building, the door to the escape room closed tight behind them, as if it had never existed. Relief washed over them, laughter bubbling up from deep within as they realized they were free. "We did it," Maya shouted, her voice echoing in the stillness of the night. They embraced one another, the bond of friendship stronger than ever, forged through their shared experience in the escape room. As they walked away, the sound of distant laughter filled the air, but this time it felt joyous rather than haunting. They shared stories of their fears, their triumphs, and the bond that had been tested but ultimately strengthened. The night was alive with possibility, and though they had faced darkness together, they emerged with a deeper understanding of their friendship and themselves. As they drove away from the haunted building, they left behind the shadows that had threatened to consume them, carrying the light of their victory with them. In the rearview mirror, the escape room faded into the distance, a memory etched into their minds, a reminder of their resilience and the power of unity. No longer just a game, their experience had transformed them, teaching them that true strength comes not from the absence of fear, but from the courage to face it together. The Forgotten Platform. In the heart of a forgotten town nestled between two mountains, there stood a train station that had once been the pulse of the region until it wasn't. The station, known as East Hollow Junction, had long been abandoned, its grand structure slowly crumbling under the weight of neglect. Once a marvel of Victorian architecture, the station had been a crucial stop for passengers traveling across the country, a bustling hub filled with laughter, footsteps, and the sound of steam engines. But over the years, as modern railways expanded and bypassed smaller towns like East Hollow, the station fell into disuse. In the late 1950s, the last scheduled train departed East Hollow Junction, a government project to connect the area with a newer, faster rail system never came to fruition, leaving the town's lifeline severed. The station was officially decommissioned in 1963, yet whispers about its eerie afterlife began long before that. Locals would tell tales of odd occurrences, a phantom train that occasionally roared through the junction in the dead of night, even after the station's closure. Passengers who'd been reported as missing would reappear, lost and confused, wandering the platforms of the now deserted station as though they'd never left. The station became a relic of a bygone era. Ivy crawled up the once pristine walls, and the clock tower, which once chimed with precise regularity, had stopped at exactly 2:16 p.m. Some said it marked the hour of the last train crash that killed dozens in the early 1940s. Over the decades, the town's younger generations grew curious about the abandoned place. Some teenagers would sneak in at night, daring one another to linger on the platforms after dark, hoping to catch a glimpse of something otherworldly. Most left disappointed, but a few swore they heard the faint whistle of a train approaching in the distance. The town's elders were less amused. They had lived through the station's prime, and a handful of them remembered the day it went quiet for good. They spoke in hushed tones of people who had entered the station after its closure, only to vanish without a trace. Some said those who disappeared had been taken by the ghost train, never to return. These were more than just urban legends, they were warnings. Over the years, a peculiar tradition had emerged. Families in the area would pass down a key to their children, a key that was said to lock the station's gates. It was never clear how or why this key had come to be, but it was always treated as a talisman, a way to keep the spirits at bay. The town council had tried to demolish East Hollow Junction multiple times over the years, but each time something would go wrong. One year, an engineering crew brought in to dismantle the building abruptly quit after their equipment malfunctioned for no apparent reason. Another crew found their bulldozers inexplicably stuck in the mud, despite a week of clear weather. It seemed as though the station wanted to remain standing, as if the structure itself was holding on to something or someone. By the time the new millennium rolled around, East Hollow Junction had become more of a mystery than a landmark. Few dared to enter, and those who did often regretted it. The local historical society, in an attempt to curb the rumors, started offering tours during the day. These tours framed the station as a relic of history, rather than a gateway to the supernatural. The guides told stories of how the station connected the region to the wider world, how it brought prosperity to the town during its golden years, and how its decline mirrored the town's own downturn. They conveniently left out the stories of ghostly trains and vanishing passengers. But no matter how much they tried to sanitize the station's history, the eerie atmosphere lingered. The station's decay seemed unnatural, as though time itself had slowed within its walls. The air was thick with a heavy silence that made visitors feel watched, even when they were alone. Graffiti that once marked the walls faded quickly, and anything left behind in the station trash, forgotten items, would be inexplicably gone by the next day. It was as if the station absorbed everything that entered it. For years, no one could explain why people still claimed to see lights flickering on the platform late at night, or why they sometimes heard the unmistakable sound of a train's wheels screeching to a halt. The tracks had been torn up decades ago, yet something was still arriving. Something that didn't belong to this world. And it was this legend that drew a new generation of thrill seekers to East Hollow Junction. They came in search of answers, but what they found was far more terrifying than any ghost story they had ever heard. The station remained as forgotten as it had been for decades. Even in daylight, East Hollow Junction looked like it had been left behind by time. The structure, a once grand architectural feat, was now just a skeleton of its former self. Ivy snaked up the brick walls, and shattered windows allowed glimpses into the dark interior where sunbeams barely penetrated. Birds nested in the eaves, and a thin layer of moss coated the cracked cement. Yet, despite the decay, there was something strange about how untouched it seemed, like a place preserved in memory, rather than reality. Alex stood at the gates, reading a plaque about the station's history, giving his friends a sense of what they were walking into. East Hollow Junction. He read aloud, opened in 1879 as a key stop for travelers heading west. Closed indefinitely in 1964 after a tragic accident derailed the final passenger train just miles from the station. The dead were never recovered. The words seemed to hang in the air for a moment, as if they were still waiting for that final train to return. The group exchanged uneasy glances, but Alex, ever the explorer, pushed forward. "It's just an old station," he said with a shrug, though the story lingered in their minds. The accident that had closed East Hollow was rumored to have been so devastating that the entire rail line had been decommissioned. Over time, the station fell into disrepair, left to the elements. But some locals whispered that it wasn't just the accident that cursed the station, it was the passengers who never truly left. Stepping through the rusted gates, the group entered the grounds. Their footsteps echoed in the unnatural quiet of the place. It was as though the station existed outside of time, abandoned and yet strangely well preserved in places. The clock above the entrance was stopped at 3:15, though no one could remember the last time anyone had said it. It was just another ghost of the past, frozen in that moment when everything went wrong. Alex led the way, with Sarah and the others trailing behind. She kept glancing over her shoulder, feeling like someone or something was watching them. She didn't say anything, not wanting to sound paranoid, but the sensation was unmistakable. The deeper they went into the station, the heavier the air became, like stepping into a place thick with forgotten memories. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was oppressive, as though the station was holding its breath. They passed through the ticketing area first, its counters covered in a thick layer of dust, the glass ticket windows long shattered. The schedules were still on the wall, frozen in time, listing departures and arrivals to cities that hadn't seen a train in decades. Sarah ran her hand across the counter, leaving a trail in the dust. She frowned. "It's cleaner than I thought it would be," she said, more to herself than anyone else. It didn't look like something left untouched for over 50 years. The others didn't respond. They were too busy exploring, trying to capture footage of the eerie location. It was why they were here, after all, to document whatever paranormal activity they could find. The goal was to create a video series about haunted places, and East Hollow Junction had been at the top of their list for months. But now that they were actually here, something about the place felt wrong. The main platform stretched out in front of them, cracked and overgrown with weeds. A few metal benches remained, their once shiny surfaces corroded and pitted. Above them, a long forgotten sign dangled by one chain, swaying gently in the breeze. The other end had rusted away long ago, leaving the sign tilted at an awkward angle, as if it too had given up on being useful. "Are we really sure this is a good idea?" Sarah asked, her voice a little too loud in the stillness. Alex didn't answer at first. He was too focused on setting up his camera, trying to get the perfect shot of the desolate station. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the enthusiasm of someone who had done this before too many times to be scared. "We've done creepier places," he said, grinning at her. "Besides, it's all part of the thrill." But even as he said it, Alex felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cool evening air. There was something about this place that was different from their usual haunts, the kind of difference that gnawed at the back of your mind, making you question what you thought you knew. He shook the feeling off, determined not to let his nerves get the better of him. Sarah stood at the edge of the platform, staring into the fog that had begun to roll in. It was thick, almost unnatural, like it was moving with purpose. The mist hugged the ground, creeping closer to the station, swallowing the tracks as it advanced. In the distance, there was a faint sound. At first she thought it was the wind, but the more she listened, the more it sounded like something else. A low, rhythmic rumble, far off yet unmistakable. "Do you hear that?" Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper now. The others stopped what they were doing, listening intently. At first, there was nothing but the eerie silence of the abandoned station. But then, there was again, faint but growing louder. The distant rumble, like the sound of a train approaching. "Do you think it's real?" Tom muttered, his eyes darting around the empty platform, the sound of the approaching train filling the air. The group exchanged nervous glances, unsure if they should trust their senses. It seemed impossible, a train at a station that had been abandoned for years. Yet the noise grew louder, vibrating through the soles of their shoes. Suddenly the flickering station lights blinked to life, casting an unnatural glow over the empty tracks. Sarah took a cautious step forward, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "Maybe it's just an old maintenance train," she suggested, though her tone lacked conviction. She turned to the others, waiting for someone to agree, but no one did. "I don't like this," Jake whispered, backing away toward the station's exit. The walls of the station seemed to close in around them, the shadows stretching longer and darker as the train's rumble approached. The others stood frozen, torn between the instinct to flee and the undeniable pull of the mystery in front of them. It was as if the station itself was daring them to stay, to face whatever was coming down the tracks. Out of the darkness, headlights cut through the mist that had begun to settle over the tracks. The shape of a train slowly materialized, old and battered, its once polished metal now dull with rust. The screech of brakes echoed through the station as the train ground to a halt. The doors slid open with a groan, revealing an empty, dimly lit interior. "Is anyone going to get off?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. The train stood there, waiting, as if expecting passengers, but not a single soul disembarked. Maybe we should get on," she suggested, her curiosity overtaking her fear. Tom shot her a horrified look. "Are you crazy?" he snapped. "We don't know what this is. It could be, I don't know, some kind of trap," but despite his words, he felt the same inexplicable pull. Something about the train called to him, to all of them. The air felt thick and heavy, as if the station itself was holding its breath. In the distance, the ghostly outline of the conductor could be seen, standing still on the other end of the platform, watching silently. He didn't move, didn't signal, just watched. As the silence dragged on, the group remained rooted in place, until Jake took a hesitant step forward. "What if it's our only chance to figure this out?" he said quietly, glancing at the others. One by one, they began to follow, their feet moving as if not entirely under their control. The train loomed ahead, an invitation to the unknown. As Sarah stepped into the dimly lit train car, she was engulfed by a heavy silence that seemed to suffocate the air around her. The atmosphere was thick with the scent of mold and rust, a testament to years of abandonment. The metal benches, covered in peeling green upholstery, had long lost their luster, and their surfaces were marred by stains of unknown origin. Shadows flickered in the low light, creating a disorienting dance that made her heart race with unease. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed intermittently, casting an eerie glow that illuminated the narrow aisle. The floor, composed of cold metal grates, creaked slightly underfoot as they moved deeper into the car. Sarah paused to look around, noticing how the dim light revealed a layer of dust covering every surface, a sign that this place had been undisturbed for years. It felt as if time itself had forgotten this train, leaving it to rot in obscurity. Across the aisle, faded posters clung desperately to the walls, their colors muted by layers of grime. Each poster advertised destinations that no longer existed, places where travelers once dreamed of going but were now lost to history. A shiver ran down Sarah's spine as she contemplated the stories these images held: joyous families and excited travelers, now mere remnants of lives once lived, now trapped in time like the train itself. "Look at that," Tom whispered, pointing toward a small table near the rear of the car. It was cluttered with tarnished metal items, old tickets, a cracked compass, and a half-burnt candle, remnants of a past that seemed both haunting and intriguing. Each item felt like a puzzle piece from a story yet to be told. What kind of person leaves all this behind? Sarah pondered aloud, feeling an unsettling connection to the items strewn about, as if they were a part of her own forgotten journey. As they ventured further, Jake noticed the overhead luggage rack, its metal frame rusted and creaking under the weight of the air. Curiosity tugged at him, and he reached up to inspect it. Inside, he found an assortment of dusty hats, gloves, and an old, tattered scarf. "It's like a time capsule," he said, carefully lifting the scarf, its fibers disintegrating at his touch. The remnants of strangers' belongings surrounded them, infusing the air with a sense of melancholy that made it hard to breathe. The deeper they explored, the more the train felt like a mausoleum, each compartment preserving the echoes of the past. "What if we're not alone?" Sarah whispered, her earlier bravado fading. The shadows around them seemed to stretch and shift, and the very air felt charged with something unseen. She glanced nervously over her shoulder, a nagging feeling creeping into her thoughts that they were being watched. The flickering lights above cast shifting shadows, and the occasional creak of the train intensified the eerie ambience. Every sound felt magnified, creating a cacophony of unsettling whispers in the air. "It's just an old train," Tom tried to reassure them, though his voice lacked conviction. The chill of the night seeped in around them, the oppressive atmosphere making Sarah feel exposed, as if the walls themselves were listening. As they moved further into the train, they stumbled upon an old bathroom at the far end. The door creaked open to reveal a cracked mirror and a rusty sink. The space was claustrophobic, the walls adorned with faded graffiti, remnants of bored passengers who had etched their names and thoughts into the metal. When Sarah looked into the mirror, she felt a strange distortion in her reflection, a flicker that made her heart skip a beat. She stepped back, her breath quickening, convinced for a moment that something else was there with her. They ventured back into the main aisle, their footsteps echoing as they examined the seats that faced each other, once a gathering place for lively conversations. Now, however, it felt like a stage set for a haunting. The upholstery was torn and stained, evoking images of a struggle or a hasty departure. Jake shivered, imagining the stories hidden within the fabric. "Let's move on," he urged, glancing at the door, as if he expected something to burst in at any moment. As they reached the final compartment, a large window at the end caught Sarah's attention. It framed a view of the mist-covered platform outside, where fog swirled and obscured everything beyond a few feet. The train felt isolated, as if it were adrift in a void severed from the world. Sarah approached the window, mesmerized by the ethereal beauty of the scene, when a low rumble resonated through the metal beneath her, making the entire train vibrate. "Did you feel that?" she gasped, turning to her friends. They nodded, their expressions pale. The train was alive, pulsating with energy, and they were ensnared in its grasp. "We should really think about leaving now," Jake suggested, his voice low and urgent. But before they could react, the lights flickered ominously, plunging them into darkness for a heartbeat before returning, illuminating a chilling scene that would be etched into their memories forever. The dim light revealed the haunting remnants of the train's past, worn-out chairs and abandoned luggage, all preserved in a state of decay. They exchanged uneasy glances, feeling a weight of history pressing down on them. The atmosphere thickened, and with it, a sense of foreboding settled in the pit of Sarah's stomach. She turned to Tom and Jake, both looking increasingly anxious. "Maybe we should head back," Tom urged, but Sarah's curiosity overwhelmed her fear. "No, let's keep going," Sarah insisted, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest. "I want to see what else is in here." After a moment of hesitation, the others followed her deeper into the train, drawn by an irresistible urge to unearth the mysteries cloaked in shadows. Each step felt heavier than the last, a reminder of the risk they were taking by delving further into the unknown. As they explored the next compartment, they found remnants of dining car service, tattered menus, dusty glasses, and chipped china. The atmosphere was thick with an unsettling blend of nostalgia and dread. "Can you imagine the meals they served?" Jake asked, trying to break the tension, but his attempt at humor fell flat. The air was heavy with unspoken fears, and every moment stretched as if the train itself were holding its breath. A sudden gust of wind rattled the broken windows, sending a shiver through the group. The lights flickered again, and for a brief moment they saw shadows moving just beyond their periphery. Sarah gasped, feeling a prickling sensation at the back of her neck. "What was that?" she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. They all turned, scanning the dark corners of the compartment, their hearts racing with a mixture of fear and anticipation. "Just the wind," Tom said, though he didn't sound convinced. He stepped forward, trying to shake off the creeping dread that had settled over them. "Let's check out the next car," they continued onward, each step echoing like a heartbeat in the oppressive silence. The sense of being followed weighed heavily on Sarah, making her glance back more often than she intended. As they moved into the next section of the train, they were met with an overwhelming stench of decay. The compartment was filled with rotten wood and broken seats, remnants of a once grand design now falling apart. "Ugh, what is that smell?" Jake wrinkled his nose, waving his hand in front of his face. "It smells like something died in here." The comment only heightened their collective unease, and Sarah could feel the tension in the air thickening. In the far corner of the car, they discovered an old conductor's uniform, hung on a hook as if waiting for its owner to return. The fabric was moth-eaten and faded, but it still exuded a sense of authority and permanence. "What do you think happened to him?" Sarah wondered aloud, her voice laced with curiosity and dread. "Did he just vanish?" Tom shrugged, but the lingering question hung in the air like a thick fog, deepening their discomfort. Suddenly, the train jolted as if something heavy had landed on it, the sound reverberating through the metal walls. Sarah clutched Tom's arm, her heart racing. "We need to get out of here," she said, panic seeping into her voice. "I have a really bad feeling about this." The dim light overhead flickered, and for a moment they were plunged back into darkness. In the oppressive silence that followed, they could hear their own breaths quick and shallow. When the lights returned, the air felt charged, electric with tension. The group huddled closer together, exchanging anxious glances. "Let's just see what's at the end of the car," Jake suggested, but Sarah felt a gut instinct warning her against moving forward. "What if we're trapped in here?" she asked, her voice trembling. But before they could deliberate further, a sudden rumble echoed through the car, shaking them to their cores. "We have to find a way out," Tom yelled, his voice cracking under the strain of panic. They turned to retrace their steps, but the exit felt elusive. The very architecture of the train seemed to shift, the corridors twisting in ways that defied logic. The sensation of being watched grew stronger, and the shadows deepened, swallowing any light that dared to shine. As they stumbled back toward the front of the train, Sarah caught a glimpse of movement from the corner of her eye, a fleeting shadow darting between the compartments. Her heart raced. "Did you see that?" she gasped. The others nodded, their eyes wide with fear. "We need to hurry," Jake urged, leading the way back, but the path they had taken felt different, distorted by the night's haunting grip. With every step, Sarah felt a tightening coil of dread in her chest. They were not alone. The train was alive with memories and spirits, intertwining their fates with the ghosts of those who had traveled before them. As they reached the door to the next car, they found it barred shut, as if something on the other side was keeping them in. Panic rose like a tide, and the realization settled heavily upon them. This place was a prison, and they were its unwitting captives. As the train began to rumble beneath them, an unsettling realization dawned on Sarah. "We're moving," she said, her voice trembling. The jolt of the engine sent a wave of panic through her, and she exchanged worried glances with Tom and Jake. The air thickened with tension as they felt the train gather speed, the rhythmic clattering of wheels echoing ominously through the narrow compartments. "What do we do?" Jake asked, his eyes darting around, searching for an escape. "We can't stay on here forever." Tom stepped forward, his expression grim as he peered through a nearby window. "It's too dark outside to see anything. We might be miles away from the station already," he replied, his voice low. The reality of their situation pressed heavily upon them, and a sinking feeling settled in Sarah's stomach. As the train lurched into motion, an unsettling mix of anxiety and excitement washed over the group. The rhythmic clattering of wheels beneath them transformed into a haunting melody, echoing off the walls of the dimly lit carriage. The once cozy atmosphere quickly morphed into an eerie silence, punctuated only by the sounds of their own nervous breathing. With every passing moment, the reality of their predicament deepened the realization that they were trapped inside this spectral vessel. Jake clenched his fists, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "Let's find another way to escape," he suggested, moving toward the end of the car. "There has to be a door or a lever or something." The others followed, their footsteps echoing in the cramped space, the clinking of metal on metal punctuating their anxious chatter. As they reached the end of the car, Jake pushed against the next door, but it was locked tight. The door didn't budge. It felt almost as if something on the other side was holding it closed. The oppressive atmosphere amplified their sense of helplessness. "Great, just great," he muttered, leaning against the door with a sigh. The cold metal felt like a barrier between them and freedom, intensifying their feeling of entrapment. "Maybe we should go back and check the other compartments," Sarah suggested, her voice quivering slightly. The thought of retracing their steps into the unknown filled her with dread, but the option of staying on the moving train was far worse. "Let's stick together," Tom urged, glancing nervously down the dimly lit corridor. The flickering lights above cast long, distorted shadows that danced around them, making the train feel alive with menace. As they turned back, a low hum reverberated through the car, vibrating in their bones. It was a sound they hadn't noticed before, growing steadily in intensity, as if the train itself was awakening. "Did you hear that?" Sarah whispered, her heart racing as the hum morphed into a distant rumble. The sound was like the approach of a thunderstorm, deep and foreboding. "It feels like the train is gaining speed," Tom replied, anxiety creeping into his tone. They hurried back toward the windows, peering out into the darkness that blurred by them, each passing moment erasing their previous location. "What if we're trapped in here forever?" Jake's voice trembled, the weight of his words settling heavily in the air. The thought lingered, a ghostly specter that tightened around their throats. They needed a plan, a way to regain control, but uncertainty clouded their minds as they navigated the unfamiliar environment. The oppressive silence of the train seemed to mock their plight, amplifying their fear and isolation. Suddenly, Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine as a chill washed over her. "I don't like this place," she admitted, her voice a mere whisper. "Something feels off." Tom nodded in agreement, but before he could respond, the low rumble evolved into a thunderous roar. The walls shook slightly, and they exchanged glances filled with panic. "What is happening?" Jake shouted over the noise, gripping the seat for stability. As if in response to their fear, the lights flickered above them, casting fleeting shadows that darted across the walls. The sensation of movement became almost palpable, as if the train were shifting, its very essence intertwined with something ancient and powerful. The air grew thicker, almost electric, enveloping them in a haze of uncertainty and dread. "We have to find out where this train is going," Sarah urged, her determination rekindled by fear. With a sense of urgency, they made their way further down the corridor, the sounds of their footsteps blending with the cacophony of the train. As they approached the next door, Sarah paused, her breath catching in her throat. A strange whisper danced through the air, unintelligible yet undeniably eerie. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Tom nodded, unease etching deep lines into his brow. The door creaked as they pushed it open, revealing a narrow passage that led deeper into the bowels of the train. The flickering lights cast ghostly shadows, and the atmosphere thickened, almost suffocating in its intensity. Sarah's heart raced as they stepped inside, their senses heightened, every sound amplified in the oppressive silence. The walls were adorned with peeling paint and rusted metal, remnants of a once proud locomotive now reduced to decay. As they ventured further, the passage opened up into a spacious compartment filled with old-fashioned train memorabilia. Faded photographs hung on the walls, showcasing passengers from decades past, their smiles frozen in time. Yet, an inexplicable sadness emanated from the images, as if the happiness depicted was a mere facade masking something darker. "What happened to this place?" Tom murmured, his voice heavy with wonder. "Maybe it was abandoned," Jake speculated, tracing his fingers along a dusty old seat. "But why does it feel so alive?" As if in answer, the train lurched again, a jolt that sent them stumbling. "We need to figure out what's going on," Sarah insisted, her determination hardening. But before they could strategize further, the shadows in the compartment seemed to shift, twisting into forms that danced at the edge of their vision. Then, from the depths of the compartment, they heard a distinct sound, like a whistle cutting through the atmosphere. The air crackled, and an ominous chill washed over them. The sound grew louder, more distinct, an echo of a bygone era that sent shivers coursing down their spines. The train felt as if it were answering them, and a sinking realization settled in they were not alone. Just as the atmosphere reached a fever pitch, a figure stepped into view at the far end of the compartment. The conductor stood there, partially illuminated by the dim light, his uniform crisp and immaculately pressed. The air around him seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly quality. "Welcome aboard," he said, his voice smooth and chilling, sending a jolt of unease through the group. The conductor's warm smile was oddly reassuring amid the unsettling atmosphere. "Welcome aboard, folks. It's a pleasure to have you on the Midnight Express," he announced cheerfully, his voice echoing through the dimly lit compartment. The group exchanged glances, a mix of confusion and apprehension swirling among them. The conductor's uniform looked pristine, complete with brass buttons that gleamed in the faint light, but there was an unsettling quality about him that they couldn't quite place. It felt as if he were playing a part in a strange performance that none of them had auditioned for. Tom took a cautious step forward, his brow furrowed in concern. Can you tell us where this train is headed?" he asked, trying to sound more confident than he felt. The conductor chuckled lightly, a sound that felt like a distant memory, as if it had been plucked from another era. "Ah, my friend, that's a question with many answers. But rest assured, it's a journey you won't forget." His eyes sparkled with a strange light, but the way he spoke sent a chill down Tom's spine, raising doubts about the conductor's sincerity. Jake shifted nervously, glancing around the compartment as if searching for an escape route. "What do you mean by that?" he pressed, a hint of anxiety creeping into his voice. The conductor's smile faltered for a brief moment, replaced by a glimmer of something. Was it sorrow? "All journeys are significant in their own way. Sometimes the destinations are less important than the experiences along the way," he replied cryptically, his eyes momentarily distant, as if he were remembering something from his own past. The words hung in the air, thick with unspoken meanings. Sarah, still shaken from their eerie entry into the train, spoke up, her voice trembling slightly. "Is there a way for us to get off? We didn't mean to board this train." The conductor's expression changed, his cheerful demeanor giving way to something darker. "You can get off," he repeated slowly, as if the concept were foreign to him. "This train is for those who need to travel. Leaving is not as simple as it seems." His gaze turned serious, sending an involuntary shiver down Sarah's spine. Tom felt a knot tightening in his stomach. "What do you mean by not simple?" "We didn't even want to be here," he exclaimed, frustration creeping into his voice. The conductor tilted his head, the corners of his mouth twitching, as if he were trying to suppress a laugh. "Ah, but you are here now. Embrace the ride. You may find the journey reveals more than you expect." His demeanor shifted back to cheerful. but the tension in the air only seemed to thicken. As the train rumbled forward, the group began to take in their surroundings. The walls of the compartment were lined with faded posters of destinations long forgotten, each one showcasing a different time and place. The artwork, though tattered, whispered stories of adventures and dreams, and yet it felt hauntingly out of sync with the eerie atmosphere. A window nearby showed only darkness, hinting that they were moving faster than the world outside could keep up with, a sensation that left them feeling adrift in a void. "What's wrong with him?" Jake whispered to Sarah, nodding toward the conductor. "He seems off." Sarah nodded, her heart racing. "Maybe he's part of the hauntings. What if he doesn't even know what's happening?" Tom frowned, his unease growing. "This doesn't feel right. We need to figure out a way to escape before it's too late." His voice was low, urgency creeping into their conversation as the reality of their situation began to settle in like a heavy fog. Suddenly, a flicker of light caught their attention from the adjoining compartment. They turned to see a small group of passengers huddled together, their laughter filling the air. They looked completely at ease, as if they were enjoying a night out rather than a terrifying ride through an unknown dimension. "What's going on over there?" Sarah asked, her curiosity piqued. Tom felt a strange pull toward the laughter, despite his instincts telling him to stay away. The conductor's eyes brightened at the mention of the other passengers. "Oh, those are my regulars. They never miss a ride," he replied with pride, his voice laced with nostalgia. The group watched, perplexed, as the conductor walked toward the other compartment, his demeanor shifting back to that of a cheerful guide. "Why don't you join them? You'll find the company quite delightful." His invitation echoed with a strange warmth, but it did nothing to soothe the unease tightening in their chests. Tom exchanged uneasy glances with Sarah and Jake. "I don't think we should," he whispered, the tension palpable. Something feels wrong about this whole situation, but the conductor was already leading them toward the laughter, and curiosity tugged at their instincts. Maybe these other passengers had answers, or perhaps they were just as lost as they were. As they moved closer, the laughter rang out again, high-pitched and almost mocking against the backdrop of the train's rhythmic clatter. As they approached, the cheerful atmosphere enveloped them. The other passengers seemed completely unaware of the group's presence. Their laughter echoed, bright and carefree, contrasting sharply with the creeping dread that filled Tom, Sarah, and Jake. It was surreal, watching people enjoy themselves so fully in such a strange place. "What are they doing?" Sarah asked, feeling a sense of dread wash over her. "Just watch," Jake replied, squinting as he leaned closer. "Maybe they know something we don't." But as they drew nearer, it became evident that the other passengers were blissfully trapped in their own little world, oblivious to the sinister air surrounding the train. The three friends exchanged glances, silently questioning their next move. A heavy sense of foreboding hung in the air, and they felt the weight of unseen eyes watching them from the shadows of the compartment. The conductor paused in front of the group of passengers, his smile wide and unyielding. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have some new friends," he announced, gesturing toward Tom, Sarah, and Jake. The other passengers turned to face them, their expressions a mix of curiosity and surprise. "Welcome aboard," one of them called out, raising a glass filled with an unidentifiable liquid. "Join us for a toast." The invitation was enticing, but Tom felt his stomach turn at the sight of the gleaming eyes and the knowing smiles. "What's in that drink?" Jake asked, stepping back instinctively, but the conductor merely laughed, a sound that felt both warm and chilling. "It's just a little something to help you relax. After all, travel is best enjoyed with a bit of cheer." The passengers nodded enthusiastically, their laughter echoing like a spell. Tom glanced at Sarah, his unease intensifying. "This isn't right," he murmured, his instincts screaming for them to turn back. As they stood on the threshold between the two compartments, a sudden realization hit Sarah. These people don't seem scared at all, she observed, her voice barely above a whisper. It's as if they don't even realize what's happening. Tom nodded, anxiety coursing through him. What if they're trapped here just like us? What if we're next? The thought hung in the air, a dark possibility that sent shivers down their spines. We have to figure out how to escape, Jake said urgently, breaking the spell of fear that had settled over them. There must be a way off this train. But as they deliberated, the conductor's laughter echoed in the background, blending with the strange, joyous sounds of the other passengers. Their carefree revelry contrasted sharply with the dread that filled Tom, Sarah, and Jake. The train continued to rumble forward, its path uncertain, and its destination a chilling mystery. As the laughter and music swirled around them, Tom, Sarah, and Jake remained rooted to the spot, their hearts racing with trepidation. The conductor's jovial demeanor was unsettling, each cheerful laugh echoing like a warning bell in their minds. "What do you think we should do?" Sarah asked, her voice barely audible above the commotion. Tom rubbed the back of his neck, glancing toward the other passengers who seemed to be lost in a trance. "We need to keep our distance. Something is definitely off," he whispered, his gaze scanning the compartment for a potential escape route. The laughter echoed louder, drawing them closer, as if it had a magnetic pull. Tom felt the desire to join in, to forget the unsettling reality outside this peculiar train, but he fought against it. "We can't get sucked into whatever this is," he insisted, gripping Sarah's arm firmly. Jake peered through the open door, his heart racing at the thought of stepping inside. "Maybe we can find out what's going on and why they're all so cheerful," he suggested, but his voice wavered with uncertainty. "Let's not," Tom replied sharply, still feeling the pull of the conductor's bizarre cheerfulness. "We need to keep our wits about us." Just then, a loud crash echoed from one of the adjoining compartments, jolting them out of their reverie. The conductor turned at the sound, his smile fading momentarily before it returned, almost too brightly. "Ah, no need to worry about that. Just the excitement of travel," he exclaimed, but the edge in his voice betrayed a hint of concern. With growing unease, the trio decided to step back, retreating from the entrance to the compartment. "We need to find out what's going on without getting too close to them," Sarah suggested, her voice firming with resolve. They moved to the far end of the train, trying to stay hidden from view as they observed the other passengers, who were now dancing and laughing with reckless abandon. How can they be so happy at a place like this? Jake pondered, crossing his arms over his chest in frustration. Tom squinted, trying to catch snippets of conversations that floated through the air. "Maybe they're just as lost as we are," he murmured, thinking back to the faded signs at abandoned platforms they had seen earlier. "What if they don't even realize they're trapped?" Sarah shivered at the thought. "But how can we convince them? They seem..." Contented chill settled over them as they considered the implications of that contentment. Their whispers grew softer as the conductor began to move toward them again, his smile returning as if nothing had happened. "You should really join the festivities. It's much more fun to be a part of the celebration," he urged, gesturing dramatically toward the throng of merry passengers. "You'll miss out on the excitement." But instead of feeling enticed, Tom felt an urge to run away. "No, thank you," he said, his voice steady, though his heart raced. "We're okay right here." The conductor's expression faltered for a brief moment, and in that fleeting glimpse, Tom caught a glimpse of the vulnerability behind his cheerful facade. "As you wish," the conductor replied, though the undertone of desperation in his voice sent another shiver through the group. It was as if he knew something they didn't, something vital about their predicament that kept him locked in his endless cheer. "Let's move further down the train," Jake suggested, breaking the spell of their conversation. They stepped cautiously away, moving through the narrow aisles. The lights flickered as they passed each compartment, illuminating the faces of other passengers. Some looked engrossed in conversation, while others stared vacantly into space. The atmosphere grew thicker, each passing moment intensifying their growing anxiety. As they walked, Tom felt a lingering sense of dread wash over him. "What if we're trapped here forever?" he muttered, not quite ready to voice the fear creeping into his mind. Sarah shot him a worried glance, but before she could respond, they heard a series of voices echoing through the compartments. "This way. Come and join us." The words were enticing, urging them to follow, but instinctively they resisted, knowing deep down that the invitation came with hidden dangers. They stopped before the next compartment, glancing inside to see a group of passengers huddled around a table covered in an array of strange, shimmering drinks. The air was thick with the smell of something sweet, almost intoxicating, but the sight of the other passengers' glazed expressions sent alarm bells ringing in Tom's mind. "It's like they're under a spell," he whispered, and Sarah nodded, her stomach churning at the thought. "Let's keep moving," Jake urged, already stepping back from the open door. "We need to find a way out." The trio pressed on, moving deeper into the train, their footsteps muffled by the dimly lit carpets. As they walked, they passed compartments filled with strange scenes. One showed passengers playing cards, others reminiscing over old photographs, completely oblivious to their surroundings. Each interaction only added to the unsettling atmosphere of the train, reinforcing the feeling of being in a world that had long forgotten them. At last they reached the end of the train, where a heavy door stood slightly ajar. A faint light flickered from within, beckoning them forward. "This might be our chance," Sarah whispered, hope flickering in her voice. But as they exchanged glances, the weight of the previous encounters hung heavy in the air. "We need to be careful," Tom warned, his instincts flaring. "We don't know what's behind that door." They stood at the threshold, their hearts pounding in sync with the rhythm of the train. Taking a deep breath, they pushed the door open, and a rush of air greeted them, cooler and fresher than the stagnant atmosphere of the compartments. Inside, the space opened up into a vast cabin, decorated in a style reminiscent of a bygone era. Rows of plush seats faced a large window overlooking a swirling mist, obscuring the world outside. It was captivating, but the soft whispers and echoes of laughter floated in from the previous compartments, reminding them of the impending danger that lurked just beyond their line of sight. "What is this place?" Jake asked, awe mingling with fear in his voice. "It feels like something out of a dream," but there was no time for wonder. They had to remain focused. The group moved cautiously inside, their eyes scanning the room for any clues about their fate. As they stepped further in, they were startled to find an old-fashioned ticket booth standing in the corner, a dusty ledger resting on the counter, its pages filled with names long forgotten. "Do you think this could help us?" Sarah asked, pointing to the ledger. "Maybe it has something to do with the passengers." Tom stepped closer, his fingers brushing against the spine of the book. The faded entries told stories of travelers who had once boarded this train, their journeys punctuated by dates that faded into the haze of history. "It feels like a record of souls lost," he murmured, dread pooling in his stomach. "But what if we find our names in here?" Before they could delve deeper into the mystery, the door swung open behind them, and the conductor stepped in, his cheerful demeanor back in place. "Ah, I see you found our little ticket booth," he exclaimed, beaming at them. "What do you think? Isn't it charming?" The sudden intrusion jolted them from their thoughts, and Tom felt a wave of panic wash over him. "What is this place? What are you doing to us?" he demanded, stepping forward defiantly. The conductor chuckled softly, his eyes twinkling. My dear friends, it's all part of the journey. Each passenger leaves their mark, their memories woven into the fabric of this train. You're just beginning to understand. His enthusiasm was infectious yet unnerving, leaving them feeling more trapped than ever. The tension in the air thickened as they exchanged glances, silently communicating their shared fear. Suddenly, the lights flickered, plunging the room into darkness for a heartbeat before they returned to a dim glow. The conductor's smile faltered momentarily, revealing the exhaustion lurking behind his cheerful facade. But don't worry. The ride is still delightful, he reassured them, though the certainty in his voice began to waver. Something deep within Tom sensed the truth beneath the surface. They were more than just passengers, they were part of a much darker tale than any of them could comprehend. As the conductor's cheerful facade flickered, an uneasy silence enveloped the room. Tom's heart raced as he caught a glimpse of shadows shifting in the corners of the cabin, stretching and contracting as if alive. He exchanged worried glances with Sarah and Jake, the weight of their shared apprehension settling heavily on their shoulders. The conductor's infectious laughter hung in the air, juxtaposed with the creeping darkness that seemed to seep from the very walls of the train. "What do you mean by each passenger leaves their mark?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Are we trapped here?" The conductor's smile faltered again, a flicker of something darker crossing his features before he masked it with a jovial chuckle. "Oh, my dear, you're not trapped. You're on a journey, a beautiful journey," but there was an edge to his words, a hint of desperation that sent a chill racing down Tom's spine. Suddenly the lights flickered once more, and the ambient sounds of laughter faded into an eerie silence, leaving only the rhythmic clatter of the train on the tracks. Tom could feel the air thicken, the atmosphere growing heavier with unspoken dread. "We should find a way out," he said, urgency creeping into his voice. But before they could react, the conductor stepped forward, his eyes widening with an unsettling intensity. "You can't leave, not yet. The journey has only just begun." Jake's breath caught in his throat. "What do you mean?" "We want to go home," he protested, his voice trembling. But the conductor only laughed, a hollow sound that echoed throughout the compartment. "Home? My dear boy, home is a fleeting concept here. You must learn to embrace the journey." The gleam in his eyes transformed into something darker, as if the train itself had awakened, feeding off their fear and uncertainty. The cabin shook slightly as the train picked up speed, rattling the windows and sending a shudder through the floor beneath their feet. Tom grabbed Sarah's arm, glancing around for any sign of escape. Shadows danced across the walls, twisting into grotesque shapes that seemed to mock them, their laughter mingling with the conductor's. "We have to stick together," he urged, his voice barely above a whisper. "We can't let whatever this is get to us." As they stepped back, the cabin shifted, revealing a hidden door behind the ticket booth. A faint, flickering light seeped through the cracks, inviting yet foreboding. "We need to check that out," Sarah urged, her voice filled with a mixture of fear and determination. It might be our only chance, but the conductor stepped in front of them, blocking their path. "You don't want to go there. It's not meant for you." Tom's instincts screamed at him to push past the conductor, but something in the man's eyes held him back. There was a hint of truth buried beneath the veneer of cheerfulness, an awareness of the darkness surrounding them. "You're trying to protect us," he ventured, trying to understand the conductor's intent. The conductor's laughter rang hollow again, but this time it was tinged with sadness. "Oh no, dear boy. I'm afraid you don't understand. I'm just as trapped as you are." A heavy silence filled the air as the conductor's words hung between them, laden with a sense of resignation. The realization hit them like a wave. They were caught in a web of despair, where the line between the living and the dead blurred into a haunting limbo. Tom's heart raced as he fought against the feeling of dread creeping into his mind. "We need to break free," he said, glancing at the hidden door, desperate for an escape from this twisted reality. Just then, the lights flickered violently, plunging the cabin into darkness once more. A wave of panic swept through Tom as he grasped Sarah's hand tightly. He could feel the train's vibrations intensify, as if it were an entity in itself, thrumming with restless energy. A cacophony of whispers filled the air, overlapping and echoing in a dissonant harmony that made his skin crawl. "What is happening?" Jake shouted, his voice cracking in fear. As the lights returned, they revealed the other passengers' faces twisted in confusion, eyes wide with terror. They were no longer the cheerful figures Tom had first encountered. They were lost souls, trapped in their own personal hell, oblivious to the reality of their situation. "They're all like him," Sarah whispered, her eyes wide as she scanned the faces around them. "They don't even know they're dead." The conductor's face hardened, a mask of defiance emerging as he gestured to the passengers. "They're not dead. They're simply on their journey." Feeling a swell of anger, Tom stepped closer to the conductor, defiance igniting within him. "What kind of journey is this? We don't belong here," he shouted, his voice cutting through the eerie ambience. But the conductor only shook his head, a flicker of sadness crossing his features. "You don't understand. You can't leave. This train doesn't stop until it reaches its destination." With renewed determination, Tom gestured toward the hidden door. "Then we'll find our own way. We won't be part of your endless ride." The conductor's expression shifted, shadows flickering in his eyes. "You don't know what you're asking for. The train feeds on fear, on despair. You must learn to accept your fate." The air around them thickened, pulsating with an oppressive energy that made it hard to breathe. Suddenly the lights flickered again, this time plunging them into complete darkness. The whispers grew louder, surrounding them with a cacophony of wails and cries. "Help! We're trapped!" a voice echoed in the void, and Tom could feel the panic rise within him. "We have to move," he shouted, pulling Sarah and Jake toward the hidden door. They rushed toward it, hearts pounding as the conductor's laughter echoed behind them, a haunting sound that chased them into the unknown. With trembling hands, Tom pushed the door open, revealing a dimly lit corridor that stretched far beyond what they could see. The air was thick with an unnatural chill, as if the shadows themselves were alive, reaching out to ensnare them. "This has to lead somewhere," Sarah urged, her voice steady despite the terror coursing through her. "We have to keep going." With a shared nod of determination, they stepped into the darkness, leaving the laughter and chaos behind. As they ventured deeper into the corridor, the whispers faded, replaced by the rhythmic sound of their footsteps echoing against the cold metal floor. Tom felt a sense of urgency growing within him. The train was still moving, but they had no idea where it was headed. "What if we're just running deeper into danger?" Jake questioned, glancing back toward the fading light of the compartment. But there was no time to second-guess their decision. They had to push forward, even as the air grew heavier with each step. Tom, Sarah, and Jake exchanged tense glances after the conductor vanished into the shadows at the front of the train. The air felt heavy with uncertainty, and a gnawing sense of dread settled in the pit of Tom's stomach. "We can't stay here," he said, his voice laced with urgency. "We have to find a way out." "Agreed," Sarah replied, her eyes darting nervously toward the dimly lit exit at the rear of the car. "Let's check the doors again." They hurried down the narrow aisle, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the stillness. As they reached the last row of seats, Tom's heart raced. He grasped the handle of the nearest door, his pulse quickening with each passing second. "Locked," he muttered, shaking the handle in frustration. "There has to be a way out of here, Sarah," and Jake joined him, tugging on the other doors in quick succession, but they were all met with the same stubborn resistance. "What if we try to break one down?" Jake suggested, glancing around for something heavy enough to use as a battering ram. "Are you crazy?" Sarah snapped. "We don't even know where we are." "What if we make it worse?" Tom, sensing the tension rising, took a deep breath. "We need to stay calm. Let's keep looking." They moved back toward the center of the car, the flickering lights casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. As they walked, the air grew thicker, charged with an oppressive energy that made it hard to breathe. Tom could feel the weight of the train pressing in on them, as if it were alive and watching their every move. They passed by an empty compartment that seemed to hum with an unnatural resonance, drawing them closer with an unseen force. "Do you think anyone else is on this train?" Sarah asked quietly, glancing nervously at the darkened corners. "What if there are more passengers?" Tom shrugged, uncertain. "If there are, they're not showing themselves." Just then, they heard a faint sound echoing from the adjacent car, a low, indistinct murmuring that sent a shiver down Tom's spine. "What was that?" Jake whispered, his eyes widening. "It sounded like people." "We should check it out," Sarah suggested, her curiosity piqued despite her fear. Reluctantly, the trio approached the doorway separating their car from the next. Tom pressed his ear against the cold metal, straining to hear. The murmurs grew louder yet remained unintelligible. With a deep breath, he pushed the door open. The scene before them sent chills coursing through his veins. The next car was filled with passengers seated in perfect silence, their expressions vacant and eyes glazed over. They were dressed in old-fashioned clothing, as if they had stepped out of a different era. Tom felt a wave of unease wash over him. "What the hell?" he whispered, stepping back. "Are they real?" Jake asked, incredulity mingling with fear. "They look lifeless." Sarah's voice trembled as she spoke. "We need to leave. This isn't right." But as they turned to retreat, the door slammed shut behind them with a loud bang. Panic surged through Tom as he rattled the handle, but it was stuck fast. "Let us out," he shouted, pounding on the door. The passengers in the next car remained still, as if oblivious to the chaos unfolding around them. "Why aren't they reacting?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely above a tremble. "It's like they can't see us." With desperation, Jake banged his fists against the door again. "We're trapped," he yelled, frustration evident in his voice. The silence that followed was suffocating, the reality of their situation sinking in. Tom felt his heart race, fear tightening its grip around him. "We need to find another way," Tom insisted, trying to mask the tremor in his voice. Back to the front of the train they hurried back, but as they moved through the aisle, the lights flickered more violently, plunging them into brief darkness. When they regained visibility, the familiar scenery of the train car appeared altered, as if the train itself had shifted during their moment of disorientation. They reached the front of the car, where they had first encountered the conductor. But to their horror, the door to the next car had vanished, replaced by a solid wall of faded wood. "What the hell?" Jake exclaimed, banging his fist against the barrier in disbelief. "There has to be a way through." "Maybe there's a secret door," Sarah suggested, her voice shaking as she pressed her palms against the wall, searching for any sign of an exit. But as they inspected the surface, it felt cold and unyielding, a lifeless barrier mocking their plight. "This isn't happening. We need to get out," Tom said, panic creeping into his tone. "We should go back to the other car," Sarah urged, glancing over her shoulder as the unsettling silence enveloped them once more. "No one can help us here." But as they turned, they were met with the sight of the other car's door now barred, the metal frame gleaming menacingly under the flickering lights. "This isn't real," Jake whispered, shaking his head in disbelief. "We're stuck. We can't get out." The weight of despair hung in the air like a heavy fog, suffocating any flicker of hope. Tom felt a knot form in his stomach, the realization dawning on him with a cruel clarity they were trapped on this cursed train, with no escape in sight. The weight of realization settled like lead in their stomachs, pulling them deeper into a pit of despair. Tom glanced at the door they had tried to escape through, but it remained obstinately closed. A profound sense of dread washed over him as he understood they were caught in an endless cycle, cruelly imprisoned within this spectral train. The chilling silence that enveloped them felt suffocating, amplifying the growing hopelessness. The train lurched violently, throwing them against the seats. The once still air was now charged with a frantic energy, a vibration that intensified beneath their feet, as if the train were accelerating into an abyss. Flickering lights cast eerie shadows across the interior, illuminating the faces of the ghostly passengers in the next car, their expressions frozen in time, oblivious to the turmoil surrounding them. As Tom felt frustration bubbling within him, he was struck by the realization that the conductor was nowhere to be found. The space where he had stood moments ago lay empty, a void where hope once flickered. An unsettling thought crept into Tom's mind. Perhaps they were never meant to leave this place. The air grew thick and suffocating, and the walls of the train seemed to close in around them. Suddenly the train let out a sharp whistle, a sound that pierced through the oppressive atmosphere. With each passing second, the sense of being trapped deepened. The landscape outside blurred into indistinguishable darkness, leaving them in a liminal space where time ceased to exist. The train was no ordinary vessel. It was a ghostly ride through a realm untouched by the living. In the depths of their despair, a strange calm washed over Tom. The weight of acceptance settled upon him, heavy yet strangely freeing. Perhaps this was their fate, a realization that they were part of the train's history, echoes of the past forever entwined with the spectral passengers surrounding them. The train continued its relentless journey, oblivious to their despair. As the train raced forward, Tom felt a profound understanding dawning within him. The fate they had feared had become their new reality. With each passing moment, the world outside vanished, and all they could do was surrender to the darkness that enveloped them. They had become lost in a story that would never truly end, a tale of eternal entrapment. With a final shudder, the train plunged into an all-consuming blackness. The echoes of their lives faded into the shadows of the forgotten, and the specter of the train rolled on, carrying them further away from the lives they once knew. Tom, Sarah, and Jake were now part of an unending journey, where time stood still, and the whistle of the train became a haunting reminder of their fate. In the end, they found themselves entwined in the legacy of the haunted train, their existence trapped in a loop of the past. The train's journey continued, a specter on a path with no destination, and the darkness swallowed them whole, leaving only the faintest traces of their presence behind. Their story merged with the countless others who had ridden this ghostly train, creating an endless cycle of loss and despair. The train, a vessel of the lost, carried on through the night, its haunting whistle echoing in the void, a chilling reminder of the price of being trapped in a tale that would never truly end. As we reach the end of tonight's stories on Hauntales, it's time to let your mind drift away. Listen to the sound of the rain gently falling in the background. Let each drop calm your thoughts and ease you into a peaceful sleep. There's nothing to fear now, just the soothing rhythm of the rain. Focus on your breathing, let your body relax, and allow yourself to drift deeper into rest. Sleep peacefully, and we'll meet again tomorrow night for another story. Good night.